before we dive into today's mystery, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It helps us keep uncovering the unknown. Now, let's begin. The sun had long since set over Jacksonville, Florida, casting the city's west side into a heavy, ominous silence. The air, thick with the scent of distant rain, clung to the neighborhood like a suffocating blanket. It was an ordinary winter evening, but one that would soon be remembered in horror. A date marked in blood. At precisely 7:42 p.m., a loud pop split the quiet, a single, sharp noise, followed by a series of chaotic echoes that sent birds scattering into the night sky. Then came the screams. High-pitched, panicked, desperate cries that sliced through the usual urban sounds of passing cars and muffled rap music blasting from a nearby gas station. In the aftermath of the gunfire, silence reclaimed the street. It was a silence of death, a moment when time seemed to halt, as if the entire neighborhood held its breath. Shadows danced along the sidewalk as porch lights flickered on, illuminating the horror that lay beneath them. A child, 7-year-old Breon Allen Jr., lay motionless on the cracked pavement, his small frame limp, his tiny fingers curled inward as if trying to grasp something just beyond his reach. His dark, unblinking eyes stared upward, reflecting the orange glow of the streetlights. Blood pooled beneath him, forming a slick, widening stain that crept toward the curb, seeking escape into the gutters. A woman's wail broke the silence, a scream that shattered the night. Breon's mother. She sprinted toward her son's lifeless body, her knees giving out as she collapsed beside him, her trembling hands pressing against his tiny chest, as if her touch alone could reverse what had just happened. But it was too late. Breon had been a child of laughter and light. He loved dinosaurs, racing his toy cars along the wooden floors of his mother's small apartment. His favorite color was green, the same shade as the well-worn hoodie he wore nearly every day, even when his mother begged him to wear something else. He was a child of boundless energy, sprinting down the sidewalk every afternoon with his friends, their sneakers slapping against the pavement in a symphony of youthful joy. He was fearless, standing on his tiptoes to reach the highest branches of the old oak tree outside his building. But more than anything, Breon loved his mother. She was his world, his safe place. When he wasn't outside playing, he was curled up beside her on their tattered couch, watching superhero cartoons until he drifted to sleep. That evening, he had been doing what he always did, playing, laughing, running. And then he was gone. The bullet had entered his small chest and torn through his delicate body, its path swift and merciless. He hadn't even had time to cry out. One moment he was there, and the next he was slipping away, his young life stolen by an unseen, merciless force. The neighborhood where Breon lived wasn't known for its peace. The west side of Jacksonville was a place where streetlights flickered unreliably, where sirens became part of the background noise, where caution became second nature. It was a place of whispered warnings, of unspoken rules, a place where the wrong glance at the wrong person could mean the difference between life and death. Breon's mother had done her best to keep him shielded from the darkness that lurked in the alleyways and behind the cracked doors of abandoned houses. She worked double shifts at a nearby diner, coming home late, her feet aching, her hands smelling of grease and soap. She had hoped, prayed, that her son would be different, that he would escape this place one day, far from the gunfire and the whispered threats. But the streets had their own plans. That night, the street outside their home was painted with red and blue lights, flashing wildly against the windows of nearby apartments. Officers crouched beside Breon's body, their faces unreadable, their hands gloved as they gently examined the scene. A dark stain marred the pavement where the boy had fallen, a stain that would never quite wash away, no matter how much rain fell. But Breon wasn't the only one caught in the chaos of that night. A short distance away, another body lay sprawled on the ground. 21-year-old Lafayette Mango Jr., unlike Breon, he was still alive. Barely. Blood seeped from a gunshot wound in his side, his breast ragged, shallow. His fingers twitched, as if trying to grasp something unseen. His eyes, wide with pain and confusion, darted around, searching for something or someone. Who was Lafayette Mango Jr.? To some, he was just another young man from the neighborhood, a face seen lingering on street corners, a name muttered in passing conversations. But to others, he was more. He had ties, dangerous ties, ties that connected him to something much bigger than himself, something that had led to this very moment. As paramedics worked frantically to stabilize him, whispers spread to the gathering crowd. Had he been the target? Had Breon just been caught in the crossfire? Or was there something more? Something hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered? The gunmen were gone, vanished into the night like specters, leaving only the devastation of their actions behind. But they wouldn't stay hidden for long. In the days that followed, detectives worked tirelessly, unraveling the tangled web of connections that had led to that fateful night. Surveillance footage was examined, phone records traced, whispers in the community turned into leads. And then, one by one, the names emerged. For men, for ghosts lurking in the shadows, their faces cold, their actions calculated, each with a past tangled in the threads of gang wars that had plagued the streets for years, each with a reason to pull the trigger. As the arrests were made, the pieces of the puzzle slowly began to fall into place. But with every answer, new questions arose. Why was Breon there at that moment? Was Lafayette the true target, or had he been just another casualty? And most chilling of all, was this just the beginning? The arrests came swiftly, but the wounds left behind were slow to heal. Each of the four suspects, young men between the ages of 18 and 25, were charged with second-degree murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit murder. Their mugshots flashed across television screens, their blank stares captured in grainy images that sent shivers down the spines of anyone watching. The community, already raw with grief, was torn between relief and outrage. Relief that the suspects had been caught. Outrage that it had happened in the first place. In the quiet of a courtroom packed with reporters and mourning families, the judge read the charges aloud. The words hung heavy in the air. Murder, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder. It was a script that had been read too many times before in Jacksonville's courtrooms. Another cycle of violence, another child lost. And yet, as the accused men sat stone-faced in their orange jumpsuits, one question gnawed at detectives. Had they truly captured everyone involved? Or were the real masterminds still out there, lurking in the shadows? The streets of Jacksonville whispered a name. ATK versus KTA. For years, the city had been caught in the grip of an underground war, a feud between two rival gangs. ATK, Ace's top killers, and KTA killed them all. A war that wasn't fought in back alleys or abandoned buildings, but in broad daylight, outside gas stations, on Instagram Live, in the lyrics of violent rap songs that racked up millions of views. A war that had claimed far too many young lives. Detectives quickly uncovered what they had suspected all along. Breon Allen Jr. had never been the target. Lafayette Mango Jr. was. Mango had affiliations with KTA, and the four men arrested, they were tied to ATK. This wasn't random. It was a message, a public execution, meant to send a chilling warning to their rivals. But something had gone horribly wrong. A child, a 7-year-old boy, had been caught in the crossfire, and in the world of gang warfare, where revenge ruled over reason, that meant blood would be spilled again. The night after the arrests, a new song dropped on YouTube, a diss track. The thumbnail showed one of the accused men, smirking, his hands flashing gang signs. The beat was menacing, the lyrics more so. Hidden within the rhymes were details only someone involved in the murder could have known. Lil boy ran, but he ain't get far. Now his mama crying under flashing stars. The song was racking up thousands of views. People weren't just listening, they were decoding. Check the scoreboard, body stacking. High. Another op drop made his mama sigh. The message was clear. This wasn't over. Jacksonville PD scrambled to take the video down, but it was too late. The damage had been done. And somewhere in another part of the city, retaliation was already being planned. People in Jacksonville had seen too much bloodshed to believe this was the end. The morning after the diss track was posted, parents kept their children home from school. The streets that had once bustled with kids riding bikes and old men playing dominoes were eerily quiet. A mother, clutching her child's hand outside a grocery store, was overheard whispering, "They ain't done yet. More gonna die." Fear had taken over. The sound of gunshots, once just another tragic part of life, now sent people diving to the ground. The usual crowd outside the corner store had vanished. People refused to be caught standing in one place for too long. The city was waiting for the next shooting, waiting for the next name to be added to the ever-growing list of the dead, waiting for the war to continue. Sheriff T.K. Waters knew the stakes. Standing in front of reporters, his expression was grave, his words slow and deliberate. This isn't just about one shooting. This is about systemic violence, about young men with access to deadly weapons, using music to taunt their enemies and fuel a cycle of never-ending retaliation. This is to stop. But stopping it wasn't going to be easy. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office announced an emergency task force dedicated to dismantling both ATK and KTA, targeting not just the foot soldiers but the higher-ups, the ones funding the violence, supplying the guns, ordering the hits. But the question lingered. Would it be enough? Because as officers stood at that podium, delivering their carefully crafted statements, something was already brewing in the streets. That disstrack had been a declaration of war, and Breon Allen Jr. was just the first casualty. The city of Jacksonville had become a pressure cooker. The air was heavy with tension, and every street felt like a battleground waiting to erupt. The press conference had been meant to calm the storm, but it had done the opposite. Less than 24 hours after Sheriff T.K. Waters stood before reporters, the chilling reality set in. The violence wasn't stopping. A new video surfaced on Instagram Live, a grainy, shaky clip showing a group of masked men standing outside a liquor store on the city's north side. They laughed, throwing up gang signs, their voices crackling through the audio. One of them, his face half hidden by a black ski mask, looked directly into the camera. "Y'all think this over? Nah, they got one of ours. Now we getting 5 of theirs. Count the bodies." Then the screen went black. The message was clear. Retaliation was coming. But for who? And how many more would die before it was over? Breon Allen Jr. had been buried in a small white coffin. Too small, too unnatural. His mother, Tiana Allen, had collapsed at the funeral, her cries echoing through the church. She had lost her only son, her baby. Now, just days after burying her child, she sat in front of news cameras, her face streaked with grief. Her hands shook as she held up Brian's favorite hoodie. The green one he always wore, the one she had begged him to take off the night he was killed. This was all he had, she whispered. This was all he wanted. He wasn't in no gang. He wasn't in none of that. He was just a little boy. And they took him from me. She turned to the camera, her face contorted in rage and sorrow. "I want them dead. I want them all dead." The room went silent. It was a kind of raw, unchecked emotion that even the news anchors didn't know how to handle. The city had seen grieving mothers before. Jacksonville was no stranger to tragedy. But this felt different, because Breon Allen Jr. hadn't just been a victim. He had become a symbol of a city spiraling out of control, and a reminder that nobody was safe. They gathered by the hundreds. Mothers, fathers, teachers, friends, people who had never even met Breon, but felt the weight of his death in their bones. The vigil stretched for blocks, candles flickering in the night like fragile stars against the darkness. A woman held up a sign with Breon's face on it. The words beneath read, "How many more?" A pastor spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "We can't keep losing our children. We can't let our streets become their graves." The crowd murmured in agreement. Some wiped away tears. Others stared at the ground, knowing the truth. This vigil, it wouldn't change anything, because in a city where revenge was law, a candle wouldn't stop a bullet. And somewhere, more bullets were being loaded. By now, the entire country knew Breon Allen Jr.'s name. His face appeared on CNN, NBC, ABC, his innocent smile flashing across the screen as anchors recounted the horror of his final moments. Another child lost to gang violence. Another family shattered. Another cycle of bloodshed. The story took on a life of its own. Twitter raged. Instagram mourned. YouTube analyzed. A clip from a 2023 documentary on Jacksonville's gang wars resurfaced, showing rapper Julio Folio, a known affiliate of KTA, talking about how deep the violence ran in the city. "This ain't just rap," he had said. "This real life. We live and die by this SH*T. And now, a 7-year-old boy had paid the price." The media dug into the diss tracks, the gang history, the feud stretching back nearly a decade. Jacksonville, once just another city in Florida, was now being labeled as a war zone. But even as journalists dissected the horror from their distant studios, the real war was still being fought in the streets, and it was far from over. The city had seen enough. The mayor of Jacksonville, his voice shaking with frustration, stood before the press. "This violence is out of control. We are at war with ourselves." The governor of Florida weighed in, vowing to crack down on gang activity with harsh new legislation. Even President Joe Biden, during a White House press briefing, addressed the tragedy. No child should die like this. No family should suffer like this. And no community should live in fear. But the words, the promises, they meant nothing. Because as politicians debated and reporters analyzed, the guns were still in the hands of the young men who had nothing to lose. And when you had nothing to lose, you had every reason to pull the trigger. The sentencing had come and gone. The courtroom was silent now. The echoes of justice barely a whisper in the halls where verdicts had been handed down. The men who had killed Breon Allen Jr. were gone, locked behind walls that would never open for them again. But outside, the war was still being fought. 3 days after the trial, another body fell. A cousin of one of the convicted men, gunned down in a drive-by. The retaliation was immediate. Within a week, 2 more bodies had dropped, one on the east side, one in the Arlington neighborhood. The news barely covered it. Too much blood, too many names. Jacksonville's cycle of violence didn't stop for a 7-year-old boy. And in the city's darkest corners, young men were still loading their guns. Tiana Allen had once been just another mother in Jacksonville. A single mother trying to raise her boy right, trying to shield him from the streets. Now, she was a voice the city couldn't ignore. In the months following the trial, she spoke at schools, at churches, at city hall meetings. She stood on street corners where blood had been spilled and screamed for change. But she wasn't naive. She had lived here long enough to know that some wounds never heal. One evening, after a rally, she sat in Brian's room, untouched since the night he died. His toy cars were still in a neat row on his dresser. His Spider-Man sheets were still tucked tightly on his bed. She picked up a tiny sneaker, held it in her hands, and for the first time in months, she let herself sob, because no amount of speeches, no amount of candlelight vigils could bring him back. She was fighting for other children now, but it would never feel like enough. The night was quiet, too quiet. In Jacksonville, silence was dangerous. It meant something was coming. On the north side, a mass group stood outside a liquor store, their voices low, their breath visible in the cool air. They weren't just talking. They were planning. "That Lil boy got all them headlines," one of them muttered. "But what about our people? They getting locked up, they getting buried too." Another nodded, rolling a bullet between his fingers. "They think it's over," he said. "It ain't over." And just like that, the city braced itself for more bloodshed. Because in Jacksonville, revenge never dies. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, the same way it happened to Breon. Another child, another bullet, another senseless death. His name was Jordan Harris, a 9-year-old boy walking home from a friend's house when the gunfire erupted. A stray bullet struck him in the chest before he even knew what was happening. By the time his mother reached him, his small body was already limp. The city wept again. The news ran the story side by side with Breon's, their faces staring back at the world. 2 young boys lost to a war they never chose. The whispers began immediately. When will it stop? But deep down, everyone already knew the answer. The funerals were held. The vigils were lit. The speeches were made. But the guns? They never stopped firing. Jacksonville had become a place where children weren't just growing up around violence. They were dying in it. Breon Allen Jr. was supposed to be the turning point. The one death that made the city finally say, enough. But instead, he became just another name on a long, endless list. And as long as revenge was currency, as long as grudges were settled with bullets, another mother would stand where Tiana Allen stood. Another child would be lowered into the ground. And the world would move on, like it always does. One night, long after the media attention had faded, Tiana Allen sat alone in her apartment. The only sound was the faint hum of the television, some late-night talk show she wasn't really watching. She picked up her phone, scrolling through old videos of Breon. His laughter filled the empty room. She whispered to the screen, her voice breaking. "Baby, I'm sorry. I couldn't save you." But the screen didn't answer. The world didn't answer. Because the world had already moved on. And she was left behind. Alone, in a city that refused to change.